Greatest graphic novels of all time. 1. The Watchmen, Alan Moore. To me, this is the greatest graphic novel ever comprised. It was written by Alan Moore and illustrated by artist Dave Gibbons and colorist John Higgins. It was serialized as a limited series by DC Comics in 1986 and 1987, and collected in 1987. Alan Moore, although a tad eccentric, is a legend in my opinion, and this is his greatest work. In 2009, Time magazine said that Watchmen falls within the top 10 greatest novels ever written. Although it might be cliché for me to put this novel as number 1 on this list, there really has been no other book that has stood the test of time as Watchmen, and to be honest, it is one of the biggest reasons we are blessed to have so many great comics out there. The work that Alan Moore did inspired so many other writers and artists that it deserves to remain at the top of the pile. If you haven't checked out Zack Snyder's 2009 Watchmen movie, I highly recommend checking it out after you've read the book. Synopsis: Watchmen is set in an alternate reality that in the contemporary world of the 1980s with flashbacks to the late 30s. The primary difference is the presence of superheroes. In 1938, their existence in this version of America is shown to have dramatically affected and altered the outcomes of real-world events such as the Vietnam War and the presidency of Richard Nixon. In keeping with the realism of the series, although the costumed crime fighters of Watchmen are commonly called superheroes, the only character who possesses obvious superhuman powers is Dr. Manhattan. The existence of Dr. Manhattan has given the U.S. a strategic advantage over the Soviet Union, which has increased tensions between the two nations. Eventually, superheroes grow unpopular among the police and the public, leading to the passage of legislation in 1977 to outlaw them. While many of the heroes retired, Dr. Manhattan and the comedian operate as government-sanctioned agents, and Rorschach continues to operate outside the law. 2. Batman: The Dark Knight Returns. Frank Miller. One of my all-time favorite graphic novels was written by Frank Miller and illustrated by Miller and Klaus Janson, and published by DC Comics in 1986. It started off as a 4-part series that eventually came in graphic novel form later that year. The overall story is great because it shows a vulnerable Batman who is fighting crime and father time. Both Christopher Nolan and Tim Burton have said that The Dark Knight Returns was the inspiration for wanting to do their Batman films. DC Universe Animated Original Movies produced a 2-part animated version. Part 1 of this 2-part animated film was released on DVD/Blu-ray on September 25, 2012. Part 2 was released on January 29, 2013. With Peter Weller voicing Batman and Michael Emerson voicing the Joker. A sequel written and illustrated by Miller, The Dark Knight Strikes Again, was published in 2001. Synopsis: The Dark Knight Returns tells the story of Bruce Wayne, who at 55 years old returns from retirement to fight crime and faces opposition from the Gotham City Police Force and the United States government. Batman also takes on familiar foes and Harvey Dent to face and the Joker. Without giving too much away, there are a few epic battles throughout the story, including a showdown with Superman. 3. Kingdom Come. Mark Waid. Amazing art by Alex Ross. For those who are not familiar with DC's Elseworlds, they were stories that took place outside of DC's canon or continuity. Existing characters or storylines were introduced to an entirely new idea or concept and often put into alternate timelines or realities. Gotham by Gaslight, featuring Batman, is considered to be the first Elseworlds story. One of the best written was Kingdom Come by Mark Waid and illustrated by the great Alex Ross. It was Alex who was the mastermind behind Kingdom Come, as he wanted to do something similar to the artwork in 1994's Marvels and within the scope of Alan Moore's The Watchmen. Synopsis: This Elseworlds story is set in a future that deals with a growing conflict between traditional superheroes, such as Superman, Wonder Woman, and the Justice League, and a growing population of largely amoral and dangerously irresponsible vigilantes, in many cases the offspring of the traditional heroes. Between these two groups is Batman and his assembled team, who attempt to contain the escalating disaster, foil the machinations of Lex Luthor, and prevent a world-ending superhuman war. For 2080, Judge Dredd, Complete Case Files, Volume 1. John Wagner. One of my favorite comic book heroes of all time, so there may be some bias involved with putting this graphic novel so high on the list. The crazy thing is, I didn't mind the original movie either. cut me some slack. I was in my teens, $2 movie theater, late showing, and I thought the movie was fun but doesn't really stand the test of time. Unfortunately, the newest good film was a better attempt at being somewhat true to the comics, but unfortunately the writers appeared to have borrowed the plot line from one of the best action films of 2013, The Raid Redemption. Back to the graphic novel. If you want to be introduced to a British comic book icon, I suggest you start with the beginning. John Wagner's unique 6-page writing style will at times be over the top, but there are a few huge story arcs that will grab your attention. I'm a fan of the attitude, the violence and the kick-ass villains. This large first volume covers 2008 approx number 2 to number 60 ground, although now the biggest character didn't appear in the first issue. Synopsis: Judge Joseph Green is an American law enforcement officer in a violent city of the future where uniformed judges are empowered to arrest, sentence, and execute criminals at the scene of crime. 5. Alice in Sunderland, Brian Talbot. Alice in Sunderland, an Entertainment is a graphic novel that is neither fiction or coherent narrative. It was created by comic book writer and artist Brian Talbot, and I'm not exactly sure how to explain what it's all about. I remember more of the artwork than the actual story. It explores the links between Lewis Carroll and the Sunderland area, with wider themes of history, myth and storytelling all rolled into one 300-page, very picturesque novel. The Guardian said, "It has some of the most luscious and audacious artwork yet attempted in comics. It truly is one of the most unique graphic novels out there." The total package is presented in a non-linear, non-chronological manner, circling backward and forward in time and subject, so the total experience is rather like dreaming. This is not for everyone. You either love it or you don't, but considered by many a must-read. If you are an admirer of Lewis Carroll's work like Alice in Wonderland, pick this one up. It's a definite trip. Synopsis: Sunderland. 1300 years ago it was the greatest center of learning in the whole of Christendom and the very cradle of English consciousness. In the time of Lewis Carroll it was the greatest shipbuilding port in the world. To this city it gave the world the electric light bulb, the stars and stripes, the millennium, the Liberty ships and the greatest British dragon legend came Carroll in the years preceding his most famous book, Alice in Wonderland, and here are buried the roots of his surreal masterpiece. Enter the famous Edwardian Palace of Varieties, the Sunderland Empire, for a unique experience, an entertaining and epic meditation on myth, history and storytelling, and decide for yourself, does Sunderland really exist? Thanks for watching.